This is Dr. Maples, and welcome back to my podcast, The Myth Within. Today, we're going to focus on a story. It's from Aesop, and it's one of my favorite stories by Aesop because it really constitutes sort of some real values within life. The story is called The North Wind and the Sun. The North Wind and the Sun had a quarrel about which of them was the stronger. While they were disputing with much heat and bluster, a traveler passed along the road wrapped in a cloak. "Let us agree," said the Sun, "that he is the stronger who can strip that traveler of his cloak." "Very well," growled the North Wind, and at once sent a cold, howling blast against the traveler. With the first gust of wind, the ends of the cloak whipped about the traveler's body, but he immediately wrapped it closely around him, and the harder the wind blew, the tighter he held it to him. The north wind tore angrily at the cloak, but all his efforts were in vain. Then the sun began to shine. At first his beams were gentle, and in the pleasant warmth after the bitter cold of the north wind, the traveler unfastened his cloak and let it hang loosely from his shoulders. The sun's rays grew warmer and warmer. The man took off his cap and mopped his brow. At last he became so heated that he pulled off his cloak, and to escape the blazing sunshine, threw himself down in the welcome shade of a tree by the roadside. The moral? Gentleness and kind persuasion win where force and bluster fell. Today's story came from read.gov. It's the Library of Congress, and they have an interactive version of Aesop's fables that I really enjoy. It allows children to take a look at the fables that are there, and part of the myth within really is the idea of giving back and raising the next generation with values and morals that have been passed on through the millennia in the form of story, in the form of myth or fairy tales. And today's reading is no exception. The North Wind and the Sun really has a value at its core that gentleness and kind persuasion will win in the face of bluster. And I think this is very important for us to examine the meaning behind this. From a psychological perspective, myths speak to us because they make sense about the internal workings of our psyche. Psyche not meaning the mind, but psyche in the ancient Greek term, the ancient Greek sense of the term, which meant soul. Now, within the soul moves, and the north wind and the sun show us the constant conflict that stands at the core of these paradoxes that really drive our internal dialogue and our internal development forward. The north wind is boisterous. He blows hard, and he pushes the person to try and remove the cloak. But in all the effort that's there, the traveler holds on more to the cloak. He's not willing to give it up because these internal winds, they're forcing him to face the coldness. And what ends up happening in this is we all face these north winds at times. We all face the winds of change. They ebb and they flow, they blow, and they could cause some internal strife and chaos within our life. And the more that this chaos happens, the more that we grasp on to the very things that bring us that sense of comfort. And for the traveler here, it's the cloak that warms him. And for our internal dialogue, it could be aspects of ourself, aspects of who we believe we are that bring a sense of warmth and comfort to the soul. It allows us to have a small box from which to begin traveling outside of one step at a time, but we always know that the safety and the security of that box is there. For the traveler, it's his cloak. For us, it could be the identity we have in the moment. Maybe it could be in the presence of being a loving husband or a loving father or a loving wife or a loving mother. And so part of this, when the wind blows, it's trying to force the person to move against their will. And this is where the sun's true power comes in. Now, the sun and the wind are both archetypal in nature. The archetype of the wind forces change, it forces erosion, and it pushes the internal workings of the soul to try and solve problems, but there's a degree of comfort that we seek in that. Whereas the sun, it archetypally is linked to the Father and linked to moral commandment and prohibition. And what ends up happening with the sun, there's a general warmth present. Now, when we think of the ideal of religion, we're taught that there's morals, there's values, there's warmth present in the loving presence of God. And really, in the sun's guise with this myth, there's a warmth present that he just beats down upon the person gently and kindly, showing him the warmth, the compassion, and that forces him to ultimately remove his cloak. And as the cloak gets removed, the sun ends up winning this bet. And so what this really tells us is within the psyche, there's a consistent need for any change to occur, that it has to be done within the elements of a deal. Robert Bly spoke of this in his book Iron John, about a book about men, where the psyche really needs to make a deal. And this was no foreign subject, because Carl Jung also wrote on the subject that in order for the psyche to change, an element of a deal must be made, that allows movement within to where it wants to go, as well as movement outside, in order to create the environment that is sought after. And so both Robert Bly and Carl Jung, they really studied the aspects of how myth and fairy tales work within. In the sun's example here, he gently just shines. He allows his inner presence to shine upon the person, and that person ultimately takes off his cloak and he wins the bet. This is really indicative also of biblical accounts where the where God and the devil actually competed within a bet against Job about who could win who could show that Job was a morally just man. And so these myths, they all intertwine and they all move the soul in such a way that allows us to see how gentle persuasion from within the psyche can create the means by which we could obtain true psychological growth. Now, the idea of this really is to gently persuade ourselves towards the direction we want to see ourselves within. This brings us to the idea of the small self and the big self construct. The small self is that sense of self, that box that we're comfortable within, that cloak we need to wrap ourselves within. But if we stay wrapped in that cloak forever, we can never realize our true potential. And so sometimes we need to take off the cloak, wipe our brow, and begin to dream life forward again, as the traveler did as he sat himself down and welcomed the shade of a tree on the roadside. Where's the road lead? Only time will tell. Where can it lead? In the direction of your dreams. Until next time, I thank you for stopping by, and I wish you namaste. And may blessings find you on your journey to advance confidently in the direction of your dreams. I hope you enjoyed.